As we get older, every decision we make about food either accelerates aging or helps slow it down. One hidden danger that often slips under the radar is canned food. Convenient, inexpensive, and everywhere. But what's inside those cans may be quietly working against your health, especially if you're over 60. Today I want to uncover the 5 worst canned foods seniors should avoid at all costs. These aren't just minor inconveniences, they are foods linked to inflammation, muscle loss, cardiovascular problems, and even faster biological aging. The science is very clear. What we eat doesn't just fill our stomachs, it programs how our cells age. If you or a loved one are relying on canned goods, this is an important wake-up call. By the end of this talk, you'll understand exactly which canned foods to steer clear of and why replacing them could have a profound effect on your energy, longevity, and independence in later years. When we talk about aging, people often think of wrinkles, gray hair, or sore joints. But aging isn't just what you see in the mirror. Inside your body, silent processes are unfolding every single day, and one of the most destructive is the gradual loss of vascular health. Your blood vessels stiffen, your kidneys become less efficient, and your heart works harder than ever to keep blood moving. What most people don't realize is that one of the greatest accelerators of this decline is something as simple and as common as sodium. Canned foods are notorious for containing extraordinary amounts of sodium. Manufacturers add salt, not just for flavor, but primarily as a preservative. It keeps the food stable, extends shelf life, and prevents bacterial growth. But while this makes business sense for the food industry, it makes very little biological sense for someone over the age of 60. At this stage of life, your body's resilience to sodium overload is dramatically reduced. Let's take a typical can of soup or vegetables. One serving might contain 700 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium, yet most people don't stop at just one serving. A single can could easily deliver more than 1,500 milligrams of sodium, almost the entire daily limit recommended by the American Heart Association. Now imagine doing this several times a week. The result is a consistent elevation of blood pressure, a burden on your kidneys, and gradual but relentless damage to your cardiovascular system. High sodium intake works like sandpaper on the lining of your blood vessels. Over time, this contributes to endothelial dysfunction, where the delicate inner lining of your arteries becomes stiff and inflamed. This condition is one of the earliest steps toward atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaque inside the arteries. For seniors, the implications are profound. It means higher risk of stroke, heart attack, and vascular dementia, conditions that rob you not only of years but also of independence and quality of life. It's not just the heart and vessels. Sodium overload also places enormous strain on the kidneys. These organs act like your body's natural filtration system, removing waste and balancing fluids. But excess sodium forces them into overdrive, causing water retention, swelling, and eventually contributing to chronic kidney disease. In fact, one of the strongest dietary links to kidney decline is high salt intake. For seniors, whose kidney function is already naturally diminished with age, this becomes an even more dangerous combination. Another overlooked consequence of sodium-heavy canned foods is the impact on bone health. Studies show that excessive salt intake increases calcium excretion in urine. Over years, this loss of calcium can weaken bones, making seniors more susceptible to fractures and osteoporosis. The tragic irony here is that many older adults turn to convenient canned foods to save time and energy, but in doing so, they unknowingly increase the risk of falls and fractures, events that often mark the beginning of a steep decline in independence. From a longevity perspective, it's important to understand that sodium doesn't just influence disease risk in isolation. It interacts with other hallmarks of aging, such as inflammation and cellular stress. High salt intake has been linked to immune cell dysfunction, where the body's defense mechanisms become overactive and inflamed. In animal studies, excess sodium accelerates markers of biological aging, including oxidative stress and mitochondrial decline. What this means is that every can of sodium-laden food you eat may be pushing your cells further along the path of premature aging. Now, some might argue, I've eaten salty foods all my life, and I feel fine. But this is where science is very clear. The effects of sodium are cumulative and silent. You don't feel your blood vessels hardening. You don't feel your kidneys being overworked, and you certainly don't feel your bones losing calcium until something catastrophic happens, like a stroke, a hospitalization for heart failure, or a broken hip. That's why prevention, not treatment, is the real key. So what's the alternative? The first step is to become conscious of where sodium hides. Canned soups, canned beans, canned meats, and even canned vegetables are some of the biggest offenders. Fortunately, healthier choices exist. Many brands now offer low sodium or no salt added versions, but even then, vigilance is necessary because low sodium doesn't mean no sodium. Draining and rinsing canned beans or vegetables under water can reduce sodium by as much as 40%, a small but meaningful step. Even better, shifting away from canned foods toward fresh or frozen options is one of the simplest ways to dramatically lower sodium intake. Frozen vegetables, for example, are often picked at peak ripeness and flash frozen, retaining their nutrients without the need for preservatives. Freshly cooked beans or homemade soups give you full control over the amount of salt added. And when flavor is the issue, herbs, spices, garlic, and lemon juice can provide richness without the biological cost of sodium. For seniors, the payoff of reducing sodium is significant and measurable. Studies have shown that lowering sodium intake can reduce blood pressure within weeks, decrease the risk of heart attack and stroke, and even improve cognitive function by restoring healthier blood flow to the brain. More importantly, these changes slow the very processes of vascular aging, helping you preserve independence, energy, and clarity of mind well into later years. In the end, sodium itself is not the villain. Our bodies need it in small amounts. The problem is the chronic excess, especially from processed and canned foods, that overwhelms the body's delicate balance. By recognizing canned foods as some of the worst culprits, and by making deliberate choices to avoid or limit them, seniors can take a direct, science-backed step towards slowing aging at its roots. This isn't about living with restrictions. It's about reclaiming health, extending vitality, and giving yourself the best chance at living longer with more strength and resilience. When we talk about aging well, most people imagine exercising more, eating vegetables, or avoiding sugar. What rarely comes up in conversation are the chemicals hidden inside the very packaging of our food. Canned foods are a prime example. They don't just contain food, they also carry substances that were never meant to be part of our biology. These include synthetic preservatives, and perhaps most concerning, bisphenol A or BPA, used in the lining of many cans. For seniors especially, these chemicals can quietly accelerate the processes of aging. Let's begin with BPA. This compound was first developed in the 1890s but only became widespread in the 1950s, when the food industry discovered its ability to create durable protective linings for metal cans. That lining keeps acids in food, like tomatoes, from corroding the metal and spoiling the product. From an industrial standpoint, it was brilliant. From a biological standpoint, it has turned out to be deeply troubling. BPA is what scientists call an endocrine disruptor. It can mimic hormones in the body, especially estrogen. Hormones are chemical messengers that regulate everything from metabolism to cell growth to reproduction. In seniors, this disruption is magnified. Our natural hormone levels already decline with age, and the signaling pathways that remain are more fragile. When BPA interferes, it doesn't just create small disturbances, it can trigger cascades of dysfunction. Research has linked BPA exposure to insulin resistance, a driver of type 2 diabetes. It's been associated with hypertension and cardiovascular disease, conditions already more common in older adults. And most concerning, long-term BPA exposure correlates with higher risks of certain cancers, including breast and prostate cancer, which are hormone sensitive. But BPA is not acting alone. Canned foods often contain a cocktail of synthetic preservatives designed to extend shelf life. Sodium nitrite, sulfites, and benzoates are just a few examples. These chemicals slow microbial growth or prevent discoloration, but they also interact with our biology in unintended ways. Nitrites, for instance, can convert into nitrosamines in the body, which are highly carcinogenic. Studies show that diets high in processed preserved foods increase cancer risk, particularly in the digestive tract. For seniors who may already have weakened DNA repair mechanisms, this creates the perfect storm for mutations to accumulate unchecked. Another consequence of preservatives is their impact on the gut microbiome. Your gut bacteria are not just passive passengers. They regulate metabolism, inflammation, and even brain health. Chemical preservatives can disrupt this delicate ecosystem, reducing the diversity of microbes and encouraging harmful strains to flourish. For seniors, who already tend to have less microbial diversity due to aging, this loss is especially harmful. Reduced gut diversity is linked to frailty, muscle wasting, and cognitive decline. In other words, preservatives don't just keep food fresh, they may accelerate the loss of resilience that comes with aging. Then there's the oxidative stress factor. Many preservatives act by producing reactive oxygen species that kill microbes. But these same reactive molecules can damage human cells too. Over time, they contribute to mitochondrial dysfunction and DNA damage, both recognized hallmarks of aging. Think of it this way: the very chemicals that prevent bacteria from thriving in a can are also creating an internal environment in your body where your cells struggle to function at their best. The problem with BPA and preservatives is that their effects are cumulative and invisible. You don't feel them after one meal, but day after day, year after year, they nudge your biology away from balance. Blood pressure creeps up, blood sugar control weakens, inflammation rises. These are the seeds of chronic disease and accelerated aging. Some people argue that BPA exposure from cans is minimal, but minimal exposure repeated over decades is not trivial. In fact, studies have detected BPA in the urine of over 90% of the US population, showing just how widespread it has become. Even at low doses, BPA can bind to estrogen receptors and alter gene expression. And since seniors often consume more canned goods for convenience, their exposure can be higher than average. Glass jars are another safer option, since they don't require the same chemical linings as metal cans. More brands are moving toward glass packaging, particularly for tomato sauces and pickled foods. And when convenience is essential, looking for labels such as "no preservatives added" can reduce exposure. Ultimately, what matters most is understanding the long game of aging. Preservatives and BPA don't cause sudden illness. They accelerate the small daily wear and tear that accumulates over decades. They push your cells closer to the tipping point where chronic disease takes hold. By avoiding these chemicals as much as possible, you're not just dodging risk in the short term, you're buying yourself more years of functional, vibrant living. The science of aging shows us that longevity isn't about one dramatic intervention. It's about hundreds of small decisions that, added together, either speed up the clock or slow it down. Choosing to avoid canned foods heavy with toxic preservatives and BPA is one of those decisions. It's a quiet but powerful way to protect your hormones, your metabolism, and your cellular integrity. And for seniors who have the most to gain from extending health span, it's a decision that can quite literally change the trajectory of aging itself. One of the most overlooked dangers of canned foods is not just what they contain, but what they have lost. We often assume that food inside a can is essentially the same as fresh food, just preserved for convenience. But the truth is very different. The very process that makes canned food last for years strips away some of the most vital nutrients that our bodies, especially as we age, desperately need. This nutrient loss doesn't happen overnight. It's built into the industrial system of high-heat sterilization and long-term storage. For seniors who already face declining nutrient absorption with age, this creates a hidden but serious problem. Canning works by exposing food to high heat, often above 240 degrees Fahrenheit, 116 degrees Celsius, for extended periods. This process kills harmful bacteria, making the food safe and shelf-stable, but it also destroys delicate compounds that are central to health and longevity. Vitamins like vitamin C, folate, and B vitamins are particularly sensitive to heat. By the time a vegetable or fruit makes it from the field, through the canning plant, and onto a grocery shelf, a large portion of these fragile nutrients has already been lost. Take canned spinach as an example. Fresh spinach is one of the richest sources of vitamin C, a critical antioxidant that protects cells from oxidative stress. But once canned, its vitamin C levels plummet, sometimes by as much as 80%. For seniors, who already produce more free radicals as mitochondria become less efficient with age, this missing antioxidant protection is significant. Without it, oxidative damage accumulates more quickly, accelerating processes like inflammation, vascular decline, and cognitive deterioration. Folate, another nutrient, highly vulnerable to heat, is essential for DNA repair and methylation, processes that directly influence how fast we age. Deficiencies in folate have been linked to cognitive decline, anemia, and even increased cancer risk. Yet canned vegetables and beans, which many older adults depend on, often have dramatically reduced folate levels compared to their fresh or frozen counterparts. For seniors, this means that even if they are eating what they believe to be healthy vegetables from a can, they may still be living in a chronic state of undernourishment at the cellular level. Then there are the B vitamins, such as thiamine B1 and riboflavin B2. These vitamins are crucial for mitochondrial energy production. As we age, mitochondria already become less efficient, leading to fatigue, muscle weakness, and slower metabolism. Losing even more of these nutrients through canned foods compounds the problem. Seniors who rely heavily on canned products may notice lower energy, greater susceptibility to stress, and slower recovery from illness, all subtle but telling signs of nutrient depletion. It's not only vitamins that are lost. Many plant compounds known as phytonutrients, flavonoids, carotenoids, and polyphenols are diminished or degraded during canning. These compounds aren't considered essential in the same way vitamins are, but they play a huge role in longevity. They activate cellular pathways linked to stress resistance and repair, such as sirtuins and AMPK, which are the same pathways stimulated by calorie restriction, and compounds like resveratrol. When these compounds are missing from canned foods, the body loses a natural stimulus to keep its defense systems active. Over decades, this could mean fewer signals to repair DNA, clean up damaged proteins, and maintain healthy mitochondria. One of the tragedies here is that older adults often choose canned foods for convenience. Cooking from scratch may feel too time-consuming, and canned beans or soups seem like easy alternatives. But what many don't realize is that while the food may be filling, it is often calories without full nutrition. This is particularly dangerous in later life, when the goal should be nutrient density, getting the most vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients per calorie consumed. The body doesn't need as many calories after 60, but it does need just as many, if not more, nutrients to sustain repair, regeneration, and resilience. Canned foods push in the opposite direction, fewer nutrients per bite, which worsens the gap between what seniors eat and what their cells truly require. Another layer of the problem is that the nutrient loss is invisible. You can't see the missing vitamin C or the destroyed folate when you open the can. The food looks intact, the calories are still there, and it even tastes acceptable. But beneath the surface, the very compounds that protect you against aging have quietly vanished. This invisibility creates a false sense of security. Seniors may think they're doing the right thing by eating canned vegetables, when in reality they're getting a fraction of the benefit they expect. So what's the alternative? The science consistently shows that fresh and frozen foods retain far more nutrients than canned frozen vegetables, for example, are typically picked at peak ripeness and flash frozen within hours. This process preserves vitamin C, folate, and phytonutrients remarkably well. In fact, studies comparing canned, fresh, and frozen produce consistently find that frozen vegetables often outperform canned by a wide margin in nutrient content. For beans, cooking dried beans at home is an easy, nutrient-preserving option. Even if it takes more time, the payoff in vitamin retention and absence of chemical additives is substantial. For those who must rely on canned foods occasionally, choosing no salt added or lightly processed varieties is better, and pairing them with fresh produce can help restore balance. Supplementation may also play a role. For instance, seniors who rely heavily on canned foods may benefit from vitamin C or B-complex supplements, though ideally these nutrients should come from whole foods. From the perspective of longevity science, nutrient loss in canned foods is not a minor detail, it's a major accelerant of aging. When your cells don't have the building blocks they need to repair DNA, maintain energy production, and fight oxidative stress, aging speeds up. Diseases that we think of as inevitable with age, heart disease, dementia, frailty, are in many cases simply the result of decades of nutrient insufficiency layered on top of natural biological decline. Avoiding nutrient-depleted canned foods is therefore not about perfection or purity. It's about making choices that preserve the compounds your cells need to thrive. It's about recognizing that every meal is an opportunity either to accelerate aging or to slow it down. And for seniors who have the most to gain from protecting health span, swapping canned for fresh or frozen is one of the most practical, science-backed steps toward extending not just years of life, but the quality of those years. When most people think about canned foods, they imagine something simple: fruits, beans, soups, or sauces sealed tightly for convenience. What they don't realize is that many of these products are quietly loaded with sugar and chemical additives that fundamentally change the way our bodies age. For seniors, this isn't just about empty calories or an occasional sweet indulgence. It's about daily, cumulative exposures that accelerate insulin resistance, inflammation, and ultimately the decline of vital systems that keep us independent and healthy as we grow older. Canned fruits are perhaps the most obvious offenders. Instead of being preserved in water, many are suspended in heavy syrups that contain staggering amounts of sugar. A single cup of canned peaches in syrup, for example, can carry 30 grams of sugar, nearly as much as a can of soda. For someone over 60, this is not just a minor dietary concern, it is a direct assault on metabolic health. With age, insulin sensitivity naturally declines. The pancreas has to work harder to keep blood sugar in check, and cells don't respond as efficiently to insulin signals. Adding hidden sugars from canned fruits or sweetened sauces pushes the system closer to type 2 diabetes, obesity, and fatty liver disease. But the harm goes deeper. Sugar doesn't just raise blood glucose, it drives a process called glycation, where sugar molecules bind to proteins and DNA, creating advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These sticky compounds damage tissues, stiffen blood vessels, cloud the lens of the eye, and accelerate the visible and invisible signs of aging. Seniors consuming high-sugar canned foods are essentially fueling the molecular glue that makes aging harsher and faster. This isn't hypothetical. Studies consistently link high dietary sugar intake with shorter telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes that shorten as we age. In other words, sugar literally eats away at the biological clock. Then there are the less obvious sugars. Many canned products marketed as savory, such as soups, baked beans, and pasta sauces, contain added sugars to improve taste after high-heat processing dulls natural flavors. Even if they don't taste overtly sweet, they can deliver 10-15 grams of added sugar per serving, amounts that add up quickly, especially for seniors who may eat them daily. The result is not only blood sugar spikes, but also the chronic low-grade inflammation that underlies heart disease, cognitive decline, and sarcopenia. Beyond sugar, canned foods often rely on chemical additives to maintain appearance, flavor, and stability. These include artificial sweeteners, flavor enhancers like monosodium glutamate, MSG, colorings, and stabilizers. While each additive may be approved for use at certain levels, the real danger lies in their synergistic effects over time. The body is not designed to process a constant mix of synthetic chemicals day after day for decades. Seniors with slower detoxification systems in the liver and kidneys are especially vulnerable. Consider artificial sweeteners, which sometimes replace sugar in light or diet canned fruits and beverages. While they reduce calorie content, research shows that they can disrupt the gut microbiome, impair glucose tolerance, and paradoxically increase cravings for more sweet foods. For seniors already struggling to control blood sugar, this creates a vicious cycle. Instead of helping, these additives destabilize the very systems we're trying to protect. Another concern is the way additives interact with the brain. Many flavor enhancers overstimulate receptors, creating a hyper-palatable experience that conditions the brain to crave more processed foods. Over time, this can override natural satiety signals, leading to overeating and weight gain. For older adults, excess weight is more than a cosmetic issue. It increases the risk of joint pain, heart disease, insulin resistance, and cognitive decline. Essentially, additives manipulate the brain's reward circuits in ways that accelerate age-related vulnerabilities. One of the most insidious consequences of sugar and additives in canned foods is their role in inflammation. Chronic inflammation is now recognized as one of the key drivers of biological aging, sometimes called inflammaging. High sugar intake and exposure to chemical additives both trigger inflammatory pathways, releasing cytokines that damage tissues and impair immune function. For seniors, this inflammation makes it harder to fight infections, heal wounds, or recover from surgery. It also accelerates degenerative diseases like arthritis and Alzheimer's. The tragedy is that much of this exposure is hidden. A label may not scream sugar bomb or chemical cocktail. It may say heart healthy or low fat, while concealing multiple teaspoons of added sugar or unpronounceable additives in the fine print. Seniors who trust these labels often end up undermining their health without even realizing it. And because taste buds become less sensitive with age, many older adults unconsciously gravitate towards sweeter, saltier, more heavily flavored canned foods, compounding the problem. What are the alternatives? First, awareness is critical. Reading labels carefully can reveal shocking amounts of added sugar and additives. Choosing canned fruits packed in water, not syrup, is a simple but powerful step. For soups and sauces, looking for no added sugar options or preparing fresh versions at home gives you far more control. Even better, relying on fresh or frozen produce ensures that you're not getting hidden sugars or unnecessary chemicals. Herbs, spices, garlic, and lemon can replace flavor enhancers while providing additional phytonutrients that support longevity. For those with a sweet tooth, fresh berries or sliced apples offer natural sweetness with fiber and antioxidants, unlike the nutrient-depleted sugar solutions of canned fruits. From the standpoint of longevity science, avoiding sugar and additives in canned foods is not just about weight control or diabetes prevention. It's about protecting the integrity of your cells and tissues. Every spoonful of sugar, every chemical additive is a tiny push toward inflammation, mitochondrial stress, and hormonal imbalance. Over decades, these small pushes accumulate into frailty, disease, and faster aging. By removing these exposures, you tilt the balance back in favor of repair, resilience, and healthy longevity. Seniors often say they want more years of vitality, not just more years of life. That vitality depends on choices made every day at the cellular level. Sugar and additives in canned foods might seem trivial, but they represent one of the most consistent silent accelerators of decline. Choosing to avoid them is choosing to protect your metabolism, your brain, and your independence. It's a choice not just for longevity, but for the quality of life in those added years. When we think about aging, one of the most visible and debilitating changes is the gradual loss of muscle mass and strength, known as sarcopenia. By the age of 70, many people have already lost up to 25 to 30% of their muscle tissue. This is not just about looking weaker or feeling less energetic, it's about independence, mobility, and resilience against disease. What few people realize is that the foods they choose, especially canned foods, can either accelerate or slow this decline. And some of the most damaging contributors are the low-quality proteins, oxidized fats, and inflammatory compounds commonly found in canned products. The body builds and maintains muscle through a delicate balance. Protein intake, physical activity, and hormonal signals. But when the food we eat disrupts this balance, the result is muscle wasting, fatigue, and an increased risk of falls and frailty. Many canned foods, particularly canned meats and fish, are processed with excessive heat, salt, and preservatives. These methods not only reduce the quality of the protein but also introduce oxidized fats and chemical byproducts that stoke inflammation throughout the body. Inflammation is a silent accelerator of aging. It doesn't always present with pain or swelling. Instead, it simmers beneath the surface, damaging tissues over time. Chronic low-grade inflammation interferes with the body's ability to repair muscle fibers after exercise or daily activity. For seniors who already have reduced anabolic signaling, meaning their muscles don't respond as robustly to protein or activity, this added burden can tip the scales toward faster decline. Canned meats, for example, often contain high levels of saturated fats and, worse, oxidized fats. When fats are exposed to high heat during processing, their structure changes, creating compounds that are toxic to cells. These compounds trigger immune responses and promote oxidative stress, further damaging muscle cells and impairing mitochondrial function. Mitochondria, the power plants of the cell, are essential for fueling muscle contractions. When they falter, energy levels plummet and the ability to maintain muscle tissue diminishes. Another issue lies in the type of protein found in many canned foods. Fresh meats, fish, or legumes provide high-quality proteins with a full spectrum of amino acids necessary for muscle synthesis. But in canned versions, proteins can become denatured through heat and processing. While the amino acids remain, their structure is less effective at stimulating muscle protein synthesis, the process by which the body repairs and builds new muscle fibers. For seniors who already experience anabolic resistance, meaning they need higher quality protein to stimulate muscle growth compared to younger people, this reduced effectiveness is critical. It means that a can of processed meat may fill the stomach but fail to nourish the muscles. Inflammation from canned foods doesn't just stop at the muscles. It spreads systemically, affecting joints, the cardiovascular system, and the brain. In fact, scientists now recognize a strong connection between systemic inflammation and sarcopenia. The inflammatory molecules circulating in the blood can directly impair the signaling pathways that tell muscles to grow. They also interfere with insulin, a hormone not only responsible for blood sugar regulation, but also for helping muscles take up amino acids. When insulin resistance develops, often worsened by the high salt, sugar, and additives in canned foods, the muscles are essentially starved of the building blocks they need to remain strong. The connection between inflammation, muscle decline, and independence cannot be overstated. Weak muscles lead to poor balance, higher fall risk, and difficulty performing daily tasks. A single hip fracture in an older adult can initiate a downward spiral of immobility, infections, and even premature death. While exercise remains the cornerstone of preventing sarcopenia, the foods we consume determine how well the body responds to that exercise. Canned foods heavy in inflammatory compounds blunt those benefits, undermining one of the most powerful longevity tools we have. There's also the problem of additives. Many canned meats and ready-to-eat canned meals contain phosphates, nitrates, and other preservatives. These compounds, while extending shelf life, contribute to oxidative stress and calcium imbalances in muscle tissue. Excessive phosphate intake, for instance, has been linked to impaired muscle function and increased frailty in older adults. Over time, these hidden ingredients quietly weaken the foundation of physical resilience. So what can be done? The first step is recognizing that not all proteins are created equal. Seniors benefit most from high-quality, minimally processed proteins that are rich in leucine, an amino acid particularly effective at stimulating muscle protein synthesis. Fresh fish, eggs, poultry, and legumes are excellent options. Frozen versions of these foods are often just as good as fresh and do not carry the same inflammatory risks as canned alternatives. Cooking dried beans, for example, may take more time but provides a clean, nutrient-dense source of protein without the additives. Replacing canned meats and processed canned meals with freshly prepared or frozen options can dramatically reduce inflammation. Pairing protein with anti-inflammatory foods, such as vegetables rich in polyphenols and omega-3 fatty acids from fresh fish, creates an environment in the body that supports repair rather than destruction. And for seniors who find it difficult to consume enough protein through food alone, targeted supplementation with whey protein or plant-based protein powders can help bridge the gap without exposing the body to the harmful byproducts of canned processing. Longevity research makes one point clear. Muscle is not just about strength, it is about survival. Strong muscles protect the brain, the heart, and the immune system. They act as a reservoir of glucose, helping maintain metabolic stability. They enable independence, allowing seniors to live with dignity and autonomy. When canned foods filled with oxidized fats, additives, and poor quality proteins enter the diet, they accelerate the erosion of this essential tissue. The good news is that this process is not irreversible. By shifting away from canned products toward fresh, frozen, and minimally processed alternatives, seniors can slow inflammation, protect their muscles, and maintain vitality far longer. Every bite is either fueling the fire of inflammation or putting it out. The choice to avoid inflammatory canned foods is not about deprivation, it's about empowerment, choosing a path of strength, energy, and resilience deep into later life. In the end, aging is not simply about the passage of time, it's about the choices that either support or undermine the body's repair systems. Canned foods heavy with inflammatory compounds tip the balance toward decline. Fresh, nutrient-rich foods tip it back toward vitality. For seniors determined to preserve independence and longevity, the decision could not be clearer.